You have heard about LLMs a lot, large language models. We are going to talk about something even more interesting, LQMs, large quantitative models. All right, we're going to talk about what it is and how it is helping in real world. One of the use cases that we believe it's very interesting is drug discovery. Honestly, I believe that one of the most important use cases of AI is just applying it to healthcare and how it can help us to live healthier, longer, and definitely happier. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our awesome guest. Nadia Harhen is a general manager of AI simulation at SandboxAQ, where she leads the development of AI-powered simulation techniques that accelerates discovery of new drugs, materials, and chemicals. Nadia is a scientist with over 15 years of experience. She has a background in medical devices and tech and has led successful products over the years. Thank you for joining us, Nadia.
Thank you so much for having me, Steve. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you all about drug discovery and biopharma, and I love to see your international audience. This is a topic that definitely transcends borders, so it's awesome to be here.
Great, great. Yeah, I just want to just jump right into it because I know that everybody is excited and waiting. A lot of people start with the technology, but I'm going to start with a problem because in the reality, technology meant to be solving a problem or a challenge. So, what are the biggest challenges that biopharma companies are facing today? And
Absolutely. Biopharma has, sorry, go ahead.
and also how AI can play a role here.
Yes, absolutely. Biopharma has a huge problem. It takes 10 to 12 years to develop a drug, and this is an international kind of statistic. It costs billions of dollars, 1 to 4 billion dollars, which is not a little bit of money, and the failure rate is astonishing. 90% of drugs fail. And these drugs fail not early in the process, but in phase 1 or phase 2 when they're in human trials. And so this traditional way of doing R&D is broken. This is not innovation. This is a bottleneck. We have experiment cycles that test and fail and repeat, and this is slow and costly and risky. So you think, okay, this is an area where AI is really efficient. It could be helpful, right? Maybe. We have over 460 AI startups that are working on drug discovery. Over $60 billion have been poured into the space so far. And what have we seen from that? What does the data tell us? Well, there's less than 50 drugs that are actually in active clinical trials and fewer than 5 that have moved to phase 2. But none of them have been successful so far. Well, why is that, right? So the chemical space is really, really hard to explore. And when you're using AI, when you think about the way AI works, you can only extrapolate predictions which are very close to your training data. And what you end up seeing in a lot of these clinical trials are examples of picks and shovels, where a particular type of AI model has been designed for a very specific type of problem and does not sort of scale well across different therapeutic areas. And what we really need is like an excavator type of solution. And this is really the opportunity for AI. And the opportunity is in the undruggable space. And what does undruggable mean? Well, undruggable means not that it's not a disease isn't druggable, it's just that it hasn't been drugged yet. And so the opportunity for AI here is to really try to find ways to decouple from training data. And and this is like maybe counterintuitive, but it's true. If we can find a way to decouple from training data, AI can actually extend beyond that, the need for that data, and we can discover new things. We need to disrupt traditional experiment design, test and fail, repeat approaches. These are time consuming, they're costly, they're risky. AI's opportunity is also in, like I said, the undruggable. So these rare and neglected diseases, cancers, things that we haven't yet cured, diseases that folks get at the end of their lives that have very complex multi-pathway interaction, not simple, stick to the target and understand with AI and build the drug. So no company has really had yet a successful clinical trial result that trumps traditional methods. And while AI and LLMs dominate headlines, they're not built for hard science. And that's really where large quantitative models come into play.
That's great. I mean, as you just mentioned, LLMs are getting a lot of attention. It's like everybody talking about them, ChatGPT all over the place, and many others are sort of dropping new LLMs. Each one of them is getting a little bit better and kind of beating each other in different scores. But I would love to hear more about these large quantity models and what is the difference between these LQMs and LLMs, and how and why they are better for this particular use case.
Sure. And I'll do a little bit of compare and contrast. So LLMs are super useful. I think we've all experienced their ability to summarize and a helpful sort of brainstorming companion as you're developing different hypotheses, or even if you feed in information on a particular process, it could help you optimize that process based on prior data. But when you're thinking about drug discovery, this is the language of molecules. And the language of molecules is simply just not in words, it's in mathematics and physics. And my CEO often says, if the cure for cancer could be found in the literature, we would have found it by now. But it's not. And so, what are LQMs? And so, LQMs are large quantitative model. And these are really trained on physics and chemistry and biology, not just text. And so, what we do is we define data in the form of physics equations. They then get translated into computer algorithms, which get run on supercomputers. And this is truly a feat of science and engineering expertise, which we have at SandboxAQ. The simulations then go on to generate data to fill in the gaps of knowledge. And so this works especially well in low data regimes. And so when you think about low data regimes, think about things like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, things that are fraught with a history of failure. You wouldn't want to train your ML model on failure data. So this is where the LQMs really come in. They offer precision that is grounded in the laws of physics. And therefore, a key difference is that they don't hallucinate. So they don't just guess like LLMs, they generate and simulate with scientific precision. So if I were to compare and contrast the two, if I fed an LLM, which you can all sort of do, help me create a new drug to do XYZ that has these sorts of properties, what an LLM will go do, it will query potentially an organic chemistry textbook. It may look at PubMed or clinical trial data. But in cases like cancer and Parkinson's, like I said, the data that we have is not correct necessarily. It's not going to help you find a cure because it's all failure data. And so it's not very useful for the complexity of drug discovery. An LQM, on the other hand, would explore and exploit the chemical space. So you can train a model on all of the relevant information available and then use LQM to simulate and figure out information to fill in the data gaps with physics. And there you have a complete picture to reconstruct of what is going on. So if you imagine a universe of molecules, LLMs are sort of like the microscope, or it can bring things that we already know into closer view. And LQMs are like a rocket ship, right? It's going to take us to the edges of the universe and help us really uncover new things, new types of molecules that we don't yet know, that is not similar to or close to the training set, that's going to lead to new cures for some of the most challenging medical conditions. And so LQMs don't just analyze the data, they generate it. And so they're faster, they're more accurate. And what that means is that we get predictions that are better, so you can actually trust the data as you move forward.
That's very helpful. That's great. I mean, we already know and we feel that LLMs are not going to be sufficient. In many cases, they are lacking certain understanding of the world, specifically the physical world, right? That's one of the I guess biggest challenges with LLMs, that they are only as smart as their data, and the data is almost all from the literature, as you mentioned, and they're trying to add extra data from video and images, but essentially that's going to be the complexity of the situation. So this is a very promising field to see that LQMs are driving some of the great use cases that are important for us, and they need actual data that is related to, as you mentioned, to some of molecules, for example, that's totally different than language models. We are broadcasting from Generative AI page. How about Generative AI? Are you using Generative AI in drug discovery, and how is it?
Yeah, great question, and a nod to your podcast. So generative AI, as most of your viewers probably already know, refers to exploring the unknown. And in the case of drug discovery, what that means is proposing molecules that don't yet exist. And that sounds really cool and amazing. How you can break out of kind of like some human bias and your traditional libraries and textbooks. However, generative AI has not worked historically well for other companies, and there's a lot of fatigue with the method. And the primary pitfall with this method is that when you generate a molecule, typically what happens is that it's not synthesizable. And so an organic chemist will look at the molecule that the AI has created as a set of molecules, and they'll say, wow, like we can never make that. And so at Sandbox, we have a fundamentally different approach where we combine generative AI with quantum chemistry models. And what this means is that we constrain the answers to the laws of physics. And that's important because that means that you can actually design molecules that are synthesizable, that are optimized for affinity and efficacy, and don't bind to the liver enzymes that you don't want it to bind to, because that would create a toxic effect. And so it's idea generation at hyper speed, but also very much grounded in the synthesizability, which has been a primary failure mode. And what we have found from our particular generative AI models is that it achieves 3.4 times better binding affinity than those molecules that have been made by traditional methods and that have been experimentally validated. So it's not hype, it's high impact. So we're actually designing drugs that beat the experimental compounds in silico for the first time.
That's super interesting and exciting word. But I would like to hear more about like specific examples, because like we already know that it makes sense, but in order for our audience to understand how it is actually working, and can you share some of the examples that LQMs outperform like other traditional methods?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. We're working across many different areas: pharma, biotech, university labs. We're actually in 18 different pipelines, we counted just the other day. And in one specific example, we're designing antibodies in silico, which means in computers, that actually reduces the need for animal studies in the first place, because typically you design them in animals. So that's just like such an extraordinary advancement that we're super proud of. But one example I can give is our work with premier neurodegenerative institutions and foundations. So this is work that we do with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, who are heavily focused on solving Parkinson's disease. UCSF is an institution in California where we're working with Dr. Stanley Prusiner, who happens to be a Nobel laureate. He won the Nobel many years ago for the discovery of a type of protein that's highly implicative in neurodegenerative diseases. And as I mentioned before, this is an area that's been fraught with failure. And when Dr. Prusiner came to us, he had tried all of the commercially available software solutions on the market, and none of them worked. And I mean, it was an incredibly challenging, I should say, problem. But over the time that we've worked with him, which was a matter of months, we were able to grow his library of molecules from 250,000 to 5.6 million molecules. I mean, so these are the molecules that could potentially have the drug target interaction that we're looking for. So we expanded his horizon of what was possible. And then Of the 250,000, we were able to only screen 7,000. So that means that we were able to down select before we even did the screening the most likely drug candidates. And this is not only a significant cost reduction, to 36x cost reduction, but a time saving. And so in one project, we screened 22 times more molecules in a tenth of the time with 30 times more of the hit rate. I mean, this is unprecedented. And, this approach not just applies to this one, going back to the picks and shovels, it not only applies to this type of indication, it applies to neurodegen more broadly. And so, and that's kind of the difference with LQMs, is that you can really expand the chemical space in an efficient way, but do it at a platform level, a therapeutic level. And so we're very excited to continue to tackle more neurodegenerative diseases as a result.
These LLMs have a lot of challenges. They struggle with reliability. They have transparency problem. You enter a prompt, 10 times you might get 5 or 6 different results, even with the same model, right? So this is one of the challenges. Well, I'm not going to go there with hallucinations and then some of the other issues that you're seeing. 2 questions specifically about LQMs. How you ensure that they are accurate and reliable and reproducible, because this is a very critical product, right? We want to make sure the reliability is in the highest possible, and also transparency to understand what happened there.
Yeah,
and I'll just make it more complex, and at the same time, how you're reducing risks with LQMs.
Okay, great question. And you're totally right, Steve. LLMs are basically an unreliable black box. They hallucinate. It has the problems as you've outlined. LQMs are transparent. They're grounded in science, and it's because they're constructed in a different way from first principles, and so they're grounded in the laws of quantum mechanics, the way electron clouds interact with other electron clouds. And so it's not statistical correlation, but it's based on the fundamental laws of physics and science. And I think that's like truly the core difference. And and these types of things are like really made to solve the complexity that is that companies really need to tackle. We don't need to optimize drugs over 1 or 2 parameters. It's hundreds of parameters. We have to do this at scale and very quickly and cost efficiently. And so you have to be able to like trust the data. And so this is part of the challenge I think AI faces, is that you can't necessarily trust the data that comes out of it. Whereas LQMs, because of the way that we generate the data, you can actually trust it, and you can also still use the data that we know, right? We still want to take advantage of the fact that we know to avoid certain types of interactions in the chemical space based on failures in clinical trials and things like that. We want to leverage the data and all of the information that's out there, so you sort of get the best of both worlds. We work with some partners to do this. We work with both NVIDIA and GCP. And in our case, we do the synthetic physics-based data generation in a supercomputer on the cloud. And so what you get are these more accurate models that lead to better predictions. And the better predictions means that if you query the same thing numerous times, you actually get the same answer, which is not the case for an LLM. And that is how you sort of can know the reliability of it. You get consistent, repeatable outputs across the same queries, which are really critical for regulatory confidence. So I would say that's how we reduce the risk.
That's very helpful. And I know that it takes a long time and very complex process to do that, make a new drug and go through the process of drug discovery. And you mentioned molecules are the important parts of factoring in finding new drugs. So what are the challenges that these companies face in making new molecules, specifically with this emerging new technologies, and how they are overcoming them?
Yeah, I think the challenges are numerous, right? Companies face the basic needle in a haystack problem, Steve. The LQMs, however, can scan the full chemical space, not just known compounds. And so this is how we tackled this particular problems to find molecules that others missed. The good news is, though, for companies is that the cost to create molecules, so to actually manufacture them, that's coming down. So, another thing that we could use is for companies to create actually a competitive advantage. It can come in the form of differentiation from smarter discovery, not just lowering these production costs, right? Because it's just not enough to just lower the manufacturing costs. You actually have to get cost savings from other places, and smarter discovery could be one of those places with LQMs. The other thing I would say is that the BD&L landscape, so this is business development and licensing, it's shifting. And so it's actually much cheaper now than ever to buy your assets to add to your drug discovery pipeline. And we think this is going to have a significant impact on the development of drugs over the next 3 to 5 years, because R&D centers are really shifting towards getting closer and closer to drug development. And China has entered the market here and has been producing a lot of assets that are relatively inexpensive to license. And so where LQMs can come in is to offer a competitive advantage for early screening. And so you could imagine, if you're an investor doing diligencing, you may want to utilize LQM to do some of that screening upfront to understand what is the risk profile of the asset that you're about to acquire. Or companies doing their own de-risking, right, in the same vein. Or if you're a small biotech where it's important to be efficient and deploy your capital in a financially prudent way, we can step in and help them move to drug development in less than 18 months. So short-circuiting that drug discovery process. And, we really believe that this is kind of ripe to help companies with these challenges that they're facing.
That's super exciting. I mean, imagining that these new drugs are going to be much cheaper and molecules are getting cheaper to produce. Hopefully it will have an effect, like a deep seek effect, at some time, that it will change the whole landscape and make the manufacturing cheaper, and it will just change the whole health sector, in my opinion, if it happens in the short term.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it is exciting. I would like to have a little bit of look ahead in future, right? You mentioned a little bit about the future. Like, what can you tell us about the future with these LQMs, large quantitative models, how they're going to impact, the future of maybe discoveries, about science as well, in any other aspects that we would expect these LQMs to be used more?
Yeah. I mean, I am super excited about the future. I think that we are really at an inflection point where we have the computational tools to focus on the hard problems that have plagued society. Things like Alzheimer's, things like cancers, rare diseases for which the economic benefits have not really allowed companies to participate in these areas. At SandboxAQ, we're here for deep impact at scale. We are really focused on tackling the most challenging medical conditions that are going to have multi-generational impact. And that's what gets me up in the morning. And so, LQMs are going to enable faster time to market, cheaper prototyping, so more drugs in the pipeline, ultimately better outcomes. We hope that these methodologies allow us to literally make better drugs that work for more people. And so, bottom line, LQMs are redefining how we develop drugs. It's not about hype, it's about results. And so, I mentioned before, we're across 18 different therapeutic pipelines. We're solving real high stakes problem. Like, this isn't theoretical. And so I think we're finally at a moment where we can move from trial and error to simulate and succeed. So I'll leave you with this, Steve. Let's stop optimizing for attention spans and let's optimize for outcomes that matter. And so a call to action for your audience, if any of this resonates, or if you have loved ones that suffer from any of these conditions, or you just are interested in learning more, please check out sandboxaq.com and just find out all the ways that LQM are helping real businesses across numerous sectors, including drug discovery.
Thanks, Nadia. That's very helpful. And if people want to dig deeper into technology side, like for those nerdy people like myself who want to know about LQMs in a deeper sense, is there any place to look for more content?
Absolutely. Yeah. You can check out sandboxaq.com. You can go to our YouTube channel. We have loads of educational resources available that your audience can take a look at. We'd really welcome that.
That's great. SandboxAQ. It's the place to learn more about LQMs. I would suggest everybody to double check literally after this great discussion. Any final thoughts, Nadia?
No, it was a pleasure to be with you here and to speak to such a multinational audience on this topic. I hope everyone took something away.
Thanks. It was awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. Looking forward to a new topic, new discussion soon.